Today, I'll be looking at why having more money saved for retirement can ironically create some more complex challenges than having less. And I've seen this play out in almost 15 years of working with retirees of various wealth levels. And I've noticed how those with portfolios and investment balances of over about $1.5 million to $2 million and over, they consistently face more complex decisions than those who might have more modest savings of $1 million or less. If you're new to the channel, my name is Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Pennsylvania where we work with clients from all across the country, helping them retire and helping them make smart financial decisions. And in that spirit, I'm going to show you the surprising ways that having more money saved can actually lead to more retirement planning complexity and more complex scenarios. And I'll share with you some ways to navigate through that. So let's dig right in. And here's what we'll talk about in today's video. So number one, the tax trap of required minimum distributions, or RMDs, and how forced withdrawals can push retirees into higher tax brackets and lead to lower long-term returns. Number two, the Medicare IRMA surcharge policy, how higher retirement income can also make your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums taxable and cost you a lot more for healthcare over time than you were expecting. Number three, we'll look at estate planning challenges and the complexities of transferring wealth when you get into those higher dollar amounts and higher accounts. Number four, last but not least, we will look at the psychological effects and the resistance to spending and decision fatigue and why wealthier retirees tend to struggle to actually enjoy their money. And now let's examine these counterintuitive strategies in a little bit more detail, starting with the surprising problems that emerge once your retirement savings start to exceed that $1.5–2 million mark. And so here are some of the problems. So number one is the required minimum distribution tax trap, or tax bomb, or tax torpedo. It's called a lot of different things, and I'll cover that in more detail here in a second. But this just refers to how larger pre-tax balances will result in higher required minimum distributions once you hit age 73 or age 75, pushing you up into a much higher tax bracket than you perhaps expected. Along with that is the Medicare surcharge premiums, or what they call IRMA. And again, having that higher income, perhaps from the RMDs coupled with Social Security, pension income, or other sources of income, that can push your income high enough to where your Part B and Part D premiums are much more expensive and cost way, way more than you originally anticipated. Number three are the estate planning complexities that happen when dealing with larger portfolios. And this is overlooked because estate planning strategies aren't usually talked about until it's too late to have any real positive impact. And number four, the psychological aspect, the decision fatigue that comes with having larger account balances, higher levels of wealth, more access to different investment options, more complexity. And this one is overlooked too because number one, it just seems like, well, that's a nice problem to have, having a lot of money and having too many choices, but it's still a problem nonetheless. And financial security is assumed to take away problems and cause less stress, but in reality, it often does the opposite. And now these wealth-related complexities don't just exist in theory, they create practical challenges that many successful savers just don't anticipate and don't realize as their assets grow past that $1.5 million to $2 million mark. And affluent retirees will tend to struggle more than most because number one, just that shift in mindset from accumulation to decumulation, it can be a little bit harder and trickier with a higher level of assets, believe it or not. And then the increased complexity of tax efficient withdrawal strategies, having to couple that in with their other income, with Social Security. Then you have the family wealth dynamics that can change when there's a lot of assets. A lot of that can cause a lot of friction between siblings, between relatives. A lot of problems can arise there. And then of course the investment complexity situation where a lot of people who have higher balances might think they need to complicate their investments or have a whole bunch of different investment products, 5 different custodians, and really complicate their life when they don't really need to do that. Now, before I move on, I know some of this information can be surprising, especially when you are diligently saving to build your nest egg. But if some of this resonates with you and you're concerned about how some of these complexities might affect your situation, just click the link in the description, fill out a short questionnaire. It's really quick and free. Once you do, I will send you back a personalized video showing exactly how to optimize your approach based on your numbers. Now, here's the reality faced by those with 1.5 million, 2, 3 million or more, and what the evidence says about some of the challenges that they face. So number one are the actual RMD calculations at those different portfolio levels. So now if you have a portfolio of pre-tax money, pre-tax 401k, pre-tax IRA, 1 million or less, you might have to take out, once RMDs hit at 73 or 75, you may have to take out, usually starts at around 4%. So that may be about $40,000. Add that to your Social Security, maybe pension income. That's going to affect you, but once that gets higher, once you start moving into 1.5, 2, 3 million, and that starts growing and compounding, assuming that it's still invested over the course of your retirement, those RMDs can start to become very large. So now you're talking about $100,000, $200,000 RMDs or more. And that can really bump you up into a higher tax bracket, and you could very well be paying more taxes in retirement than you were when you were working. In a study done by Geisler and Hulls on tax efficient withdrawal strategies, they found that the tax impact of additional income due to large RMDs coupled with Social Security pushes people into much higher tax rates than they actually realize, especially once you consider that Social Security starts to become up to subject to tax up to 50% of the benefits, up to 85% of the benefits at certain points. And once you reach those limits, or once you hit those triggers per se, it can cause what they call a tax torpedo. Coupled with that, the Medicare IRMA surcharge premium, that really gets affected once you have those large RMDs coming in. So just looking at 2025 Medicare Part B premiums and Part D surcharges, you can see that the income brackets, whether you're single or a married couple, depending on which one you fall into, that's going to determine how much premium you're going to pay. And going back to the first point on the RMDs, if those are pretty large, those are putting you now into a higher Medicare premium bracket. You're now paying a lot more for healthcare than you originally expected. And all the normal national average numbers on healthcare costs in retirement are usually based off of the lowest premium, not factoring in a lot of these higher ones. So this can really sneak up and add a lot of expense to your healthcare. And then adding those two factors together just shows and highlights the tax bracket challenges that come with managing larger amounts of money and larger portfolios, especially if we're considering non-retirement accounts. I've been talking about pre-tax retirement accounts so far, but when you get into non-retirement accounts like a brokerage account, where you're keeping maybe money market funds or mutual funds, a lot of these, especially with high dollar amounts, I've seen extremely complicated portfolios that don't need to be that complex. They're extremely tax inefficient. There might be 25 or 30 different mutual funds spitting out all kinds of capital gains or interest that's taxed at ordinary income tax rates, just because it seems like, well, there's a lot of money, so it should be very complex. It doesn't have to be complex. That's just adding another layer of inefficiency and something else that another problem that needs to be solved. There's also the legacy planning and estate planning considerations that arise with these larger levels of wealth. So some of this gets overlooked a lot, because I find just from working with clients and helping them with estate cases, in some instances, especially if there's larger wealth, the parents will be much less likely to talk about it with their children or beneficiaries. So then once they actually pass away, there's a huge surprise and they don't know that they were inheriting this large amount of money. So then there wasn't any preparation done to be able to adjust for it. That can be one factor. Number two can just be the tax and other factors. Some states have inheritance tax, like the state I'm in, Pennsylvania. So some strategies for that could be to, maybe get out ahead of that and plan for those inheritance taxes, save a little bit of money. But I find this often gets neglected and put off until it's too late to really do much. And then lastly, we have my favorite part, and I think the part that's most impactful and most overlooked, is the psychological issues and what we might call the psychological resistance to spending. So retirees with larger wealth levels, believe it or not, will often struggle to spend down their retirement assets. And I've seen this play out in my experience as well. A lot of my time now working with my clients, many of them is actually trying to encourage them to spend more of the money that they've built, because that's the whole point of it, right? The point is to enjoy your money, is to add value to your life, but it doesn't always play out that way. According to a study done by Blanchett and Feinke, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, called Guaranteed Income, A License to Spend, what they found is that many retirees spend way less from their wealth than economic theory would predict, and those who have significant savings actually underspend the most, which that is very surprising to a lot of people. You'd think they would spend more, but they actually don't. And the reasons for that can be quite complex. And in this study, they found a variety of reasons to try to attempt to figure out why this underspending happened. But even when accounting for common sense factors or other things that you might consider that they would have already implemented in their plan, they still couldn't really put their finger on why retirees would underspend so much. So the problem here is a lot more complex than many realize. And that brings me into my last point, which is just decision fatigue and choice overload. And this seems ironic to some because having more wealth, more resources is thought to make life easier and simplify your life, but it actually can sometimes work the opposite. In an interesting study done by Iyengar and Lepper called When Choice is Demotivating, Can One Desire Too Much of a Good Thing?, they found that out of the experiments that they did, participants enjoyed greater subsequent satisfaction with selections and wrote better essays when their original set of options had been limited. And I've found this same effect in working with retirees as well. When there's a lot of complicated decisions to be made with tax planning, Social Security, withdrawals, investments, a lot of times it will just create paralysis by analysis. But understanding some of these specific challenges allows us to develop specialized strategies to help manage these larger retirement portfolio situations more effectively. So some of the things I look at to mitigate some of these problems are, number one, proactive RMD planning. That is a big one. So utilizing Roth conversions earlier in retirement rather than waiting until maybe 65, 70. The earlier you start doing it, the more time you have for that to pay off and help you. And now it's different for everybody. There's a lot of factors that go into doing Roth conversion, so it's not something that you should just jump into without examining all the factors. But paying lower taxes at a rate that we know we're going to be at now to get ahead of those giant RMDs coming later can pay off big time later if done correctly. And that solves the Medicare IRMA surcharge problem. So if we can control what our taxes are going to be and we can plan it out over 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, we can avoid running into those Medicare IRMA traps and make sure that we're not paying a lot more for healthcare than we actually need to. On the estate planning side, starting to do that earlier and addressing that head on with trust, gifting strategies. For example, I talked about inheritance tax before. If you're living in an inheritance tax state, you can give money while you're living to avoid the inheritance tax. And now, of course, I have to give the disclaimer, I'm not an estate planning attorney, so don't take anything that I'm saying as estate planning advice. Make sure you're working with one. But there are a lot of strategies that you can do to get out ahead of this and start doing some intentional planning instead of waiting till the last second and then your beneficiaries get hit with all kinds of issues and problems. I worked with a big estate case recently where the children inherited a large amount of money from their parents, but none of the beneficiary planning had been done very well, and it created a lot of problems for them. So not only were they dealing with the loss of their mom and dad, they had to deal with all these complications to settle the estate, figure out what money goes where, how to get it from the different sources, and dealing with that just created a lot of extra stress on top of the grief from dealing with the loss of their parents, and that's one of the outcomes we want to avoid. And then lastly, to deal with the psychological effects, is creating a simplified decision framework, I guess you could say. So automating things when possible, simplifying your life, your financial life is a big one. Going back to what I talked about earlier, I'll often see people who come from, maybe if they're coming from a big box firm like a Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley, something like that, they might have really complicated portfolios that they do not need, or they have portfolios or investments at 5 or 6 different custodians because they thought that, well, maybe that it was a good idea to do that. So now they have 6 sets of statements, 6 different advisors, and they're just complicating their retirement unnecessarily. So simplifying is better, especially when your wealth is increasing. The higher level of wealth, I would argue that the more simple that you can make it and the more simplified it can be, the better it's going to be for your life and help you sleep much better at night. And now once you count all these factors and take everything into account, including the psychological factors, having a strategy and having a proactive approach to all of these things is very critical, not only to save you a lot of taxes over time, but improve portfolio returns because of less tax drag, improve quality of sleep at night because you've simplified your financial life, and maybe made your children or beneficiaries rest a little bit easier knowing that you have everything planned out correctly and they don't have to stress if something happens to you. So now that you understand the surprising differences between retiring with $1 million or $1.5 million or more, you can approach your retirement planning with a little bit more clarity about the challenges and opportunities at your specific wealth level. And if you need help optimizing your retirement plan, just click the link in the description below, fill out the short questionnaire. It's totally free. I will send you back a personalized video breaking down the exact steps you can take to help in your specific circumstances. If I can help, just let me know. I'm glad to do it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.